What's going on, guys? We are back here again today with some more Pokemon Showdown Animal Abuse Simulator, and today I have a fantastic little rain team I put together for the UU tier. I've actually been having a lot more fun with the UU tier than the Pokemon OU tier because I find it personally to be a lot less insane right now. In the OU tier, you got things like Tapu Koko, Tapu Lele, things like that running around that have next to no switch-ins. I feel it's very restrictive, I want to say, in terms of what you can do on a team. You know, every team tends to boil down to something really simple like Mega Venusaur, Ash Greninja, Heatran cores, you know, standard Firewater Grass, maybe an AV Mergina or something like that to take hits from opposing Tapu Lele. And it's just so boring to me personally at the moment. It just seems very cookie cutter, very obvious, very standard. And I say that and I have a rain team in UU. But with that said, I feel the UU actually offers a lot more room for diversity. I would show you the list of usable Pokemon down here, but unfortunately it's not implemented into Pokemon Showdown as of yet, so you just have to know what's legal, I guess, pretty much. But all that said, we have a rain team here, and I guess we should go over the team real quick before I actually hop into the battles I have here. So obviously it's a rain team, right? So we have to have Politoed as a lead. That's, well, not as a lead necessarily. Obviously it's a rain team. We have to have the Politoed there to set up the rain support for us. We have a Damprock as the item to extend that to 8 turns. Now, if you're looking up here, you'll notice that it's not like a hardcore rain team. No Swift Swimmers or anything like that. It's more of a rain balance team, which is another thing I really like about the UU tier right now. You don't have to play hyper offense every single game, and you don't have to play stall every single game if you want to have a good chance. Balance seems to actually have a place down here, which is really cool. It's very different from the overused tier right now. That little tangent aside, let's talk about Politoed. So the moveset's pretty basic here, just Scald for stab, obviously. And that 30% chance to burn is very nice, as always. We have Encore here for fat things that want to set up on us, like Suicune and Cresselia. We just Encore them if they should decide to go for a Calm Mind. Dragonite, things like that want to go for Dragon Dance. Salamence is another one. While these things can outspeed us and deal a lot of damage to us, we kind of put them in a checkmate position where they're forced to attack us because should they choose to go for DD, we just hit them with a slow Encore, and then they are useless for, I believe it's 2 to 7 turns. It's something like that. Then we have Toxic, just to put things on a timer. Mons such as Gastrodon, such as Volcanion, that want to switch into Politoed. It's always really good to be able to just hit them up with a Toxic on the switch, put them on a timer, force their hand a little bit, make every single move they take count. Because if we can kind of play around these threats, we'll be able to take them out without even hitting them a single time if need be, which is pretty cool. Latias would be another one that we want to be able to hit on the switch. Latias is a very common switch into Politoed, being that it can't really do much to it. Rest is our final move here, just to kind of preserve the weather a little bit. It's not... How should I put it? I really don't know about this last move slot. I like it here in the sense that should we face opposing weathers like Sun or Sand teams, it's really nice to be able to have Politoed in the battle for the long haul, if that makes sense. We don't want to go down and lose our weather because that's going to be a huge detriment to us in these kind of matchups, but I don't really find myself using Rest too often. I will say that when I do use it, it often ends up being clutch, so yeah, I think it works. It works. Now for the next member of our team, we have Choice Banded Scissor. Can you believe the Choice Band Scissor is actually legal in UU? Me neither, dude. It's crazy. The moveset, it's pretty obvious. Bullet Punch, obvious. Priority Stab is obvious. U-turn to gain that momentum and hit things just ridiculously hard with Scissor's redonkulous attack stat. We have Pursuit in case we switch into something like a Latias without HP Fire, or even if it does have HP Fire thanks to the rain. We'll be able to trap that thing, take it out of the match, which is good because as you can probably see, we have a bit of a spike stack thing going on, or at least hazard stack, I guess. I don't know what you want to call it, but we have a hazard thing going on over here, so being able to get rid of a common defogger such as Latias is fantastic for us. And in the last slot, we just have Superpower. Just a very strong move overall. Hits things very hard. It's just a good move that rounds out coverage. It lets you take on steel types a little bit better. It lets you have something for something such as, say, a Alolan Muck or Gigalith or any... Well, Gigalith wouldn't switch into you, but it's just a good coverage move all around. For our third member here, we have the Electrium Z Thunderous Therian formation. And this is like the thing that I wanted to try out with this team. So, for those of you that don't know, Electrium Z Thunderbolt gives you, I believe the move is called Gigavolt Havoc. And it has a ridiculous base power. It's like 175 base power. So basically, for a single turn, you can double your attack with Electrium Z, which is absolutely disgusting. It's so broken. I don't know why it's here, but it is, and I'm going to abuse it. Now, you could opt to use Thunder, and that'll bump you up to 185 base power when using the Electrium Z, but I don't find that it's all that mandatory. Not to mention then you run the risk of having to go for Thunder outside of Rain, and as we all know, Thunder's a great move with 70% accuracy, so it kind of hurts the consistency of the team a little bit. So I prefer Thunderbolt. You could run Thunder, doesn't really make a difference. Next slot is HP Ice for things such as Gliscor, which is down here for some other odd reason. Opposing Thunder is Therians, which would otherwise be able to wall you thanks to their Volt Absorb. You know, just things like that. Things that don't appreciate the ice coverage. Mons like Salamence that'll just drop to that. Dragonite as well doesn't appreciate it, although it does have the multi-scale, so that's more of a case of Dragonite coming in on rocks and then you hit it with an HP Ice in order to take it out. And then for the last two slots, we have a bit of a double dance set going on here. We got the Nasty Plot to boost our already insanely high special attack, and then Agility to boost our decent speed. It's 101 if I'm not mistaken. We are running Modest, so that'll put us in a position to be outsped by other base 100s like Jirachi, Celebi, etc. But Jirachi, if running max speed, is more often than not either Scarfed or Z Happy Hour, which will outspeed you after the boost. And Celebi doesn't tend to run max speed, but it's just something to keep in mind. Base 100s will be able to outspeed you with a Modest nature. You could run Timid, but I find that the extra power you get from the Modest nature is far more important. Just for blowing holes in the teams alike. With Nasty Plot, you just destroy fat teams, and with that Agility, you can kind of clean up on more offensive teams pretty easily. Makes for a very good sweeper. Now we have Tentacruel in our fourth slot here. Just an all-around pain in the ass mon to deal with if you're not readily prepared for it. If you don't have something that can hit it for massive super effective damage like a strong psychic attack, ground attack, or electric attack, you're going to not find yourself having a good time facing off against this guy. So we have just Scald, Standard Stab is obvious. Then we have Rapid Spin to provide hazard support for mostly just for Thunderous. The rest of my team doesn't really mind hazards too much. We're not particularly weak to them, but spikes could be annoying. T-spikes could be annoying, which is great because Tentacruel gives us the ability to just absorb them by virtue of switching in, which is amazing. Then we have Protect to capitalize on our Black Sludge plus Rain Dish combination. With Black Sludge plus Rain Dish, we're getting about 12.5% of our life per turn, and if you just throw a Protect on top of that, you're looking at 25% of your health regained in just a very short period of time, and it's very safe to do so in a lot of situations. So that's really nice. It makes Tentacruel very, very difficult to take down. And then in our last slot, we have Toxic Spikes. You could run Toxic in this slot, but I think Toxic Spikes is better just for the fact that you can spread poison without having to have Tentacruel in. And that can be very, very handy in certain situations. And I think we'll see a few of those in the games that I have here. But for our fifth slot, we have Klefki. This dude's annoying. I don't know why he's UU, but here he is, the spike stacking asshole that he always has been. We have Play Rough for our stab because Weavile is very annoying to this team. Otherwise, things like Weavile, things like Mega Sharpedo, that we otherwise don't have a very solid response to, so we have Play Rough there, obviously, hits them super effectively. We can't Thunder Wave them anymore because of the way the Prankster works in Gen 7, but it's still a useful ability to have for other fast threats. I don't know why I skipped over Spikes, but now we're talking about Thunder Wave, I guess. So for things that like Dragonite without a Lumberry, they usually don't run Lumberry down here, they're really more about that Z move or that Choice Band set. So you can Thunder Wave something like that, even if they want to Dragon Dance up, their speed is crippled, so you can take them out with something else. Things like Salamence, very much the same situation. Mega Aerodactyl, all these threats that are incredibly fast can be crippled by just a single click of T-Wave, 90% of the time anyways. Back to our second move here, we have Spikes, because while our team isn't lacking in offense, it appreciates the chip damage provided by Spikes when you force your opponent to switch around. Spikes are very good at the moment. I don't know why I don't see more of them, especially considering how skewed towards offense a lot of players tend to be down here. It's not as bad as OU, but I still think a lot of that mentality has been carrying over where people want to just go hyper offense all the time, and I don't really see where it's necessary down here. Either way, Spikes puts the hurting on people who tend to switch around. It makes every move count, if that makes sense. You can't just pivot around. You can't just pivot around this team because the hazard damage racks up too quickly, so we want to capitalize on that as much as possible. Klefki is probably the best spiker. You know what? No, I take that back. Frostlass probably gives you some competition there, but Klefki's advantage here is that it's guaranteed to spike thanks to its Prankster ability, so you can always count on at least one spike going up. And from there, it's really up to you to play around their potential Rapid Spinner or Defogger, but what else is new, right? And in our final slot, we have Magnet Rise in order to better combat ground types such as Mammal Swine, who cannot touch us should we decide to go for a Magnet Rise. Things like Gliscor, we can take mons like those and turn them into setup fodder for us. I don't think Magnet Rise prevents 1,000 arrows from Zygarde from hitting you, so that's something to keep in mind, but I haven't actually tested that. I've just assumed that it doesn't work. And in our last slot, we have Celebi, which is just, you know, a nice little mon to round out our team here. It has the grass coverage. Well, it doesn't have grass coverage, but it is a grass type to help us better take on opposing water types. It appreciates the rain, reducing the power of fire attacks. And it's just an all-around solid rocker. We have Psychic as our stab of choice for things like Keldeo. And although we could use Giga Drain to the same effect, I find that Psychic is better on this team because it also allows you to hit opposing Tentacruel and other such mons that would otherwise be able to wall a Giga Drain set. Toxicroak's another one that comes to mind. If they want to try and switch in predicting a Giga Drain, you can just smack them with a Psychic and take them out. It's pretty nice. And as I've said, this is our Stealth Rocker, so obviously Stealth Rock is going to be found on the set. I know it's crazy, Hope I'm not going too fast for you guys. Then we have Recover to recover our health and keep us in the game for a lot longer. It's really nice in combination with Tentacruel because they both check a mon such as Keldeo very well. However, there's going to be times when you don't necessarily want to sack Tentacruel too early to Keldeo because they may have something else the Tentacruel is needed to check, and vice versa. You may not want to sack Celebi immediately to a Keldeo because they may have something that only Celebi can check. And now for our last move, we have Baton Pass. And I had Baton Pass over U-Turn in order to escape Pursuit Trappers such as Alolan Muck that are down in the tier, and they're pretty cool actually. Alolan Muck is a very cool mon right now. But with Baton Pass, we can escape any kind of Pursuit Trap shenanigans because the Baton Pass move does not account for Pursuit. In other words, you can go for Baton Pass and you will not be hit by Pursuit should they choose to go for it, whereas if you were to use U-Turn, you would still find yourself in that situation to be Pursuit Trapped by Alolan Muck and other mons with Pursuit such as Scizor. And yeah, that's just about it for this team, I do believe, so let's go ahead and take a look at our first battle. Alright, so our first one here is versus a guy named Dividing by Zero, and now, I didn't know this at the time, but it turns out this guy is actually very highly rated on the ladder. Like, you'll see at the end of the game, I get like a ton of points for this one. Spoiler alert, I do end up pulling this one out. His team's pretty scary, so we see the Jirachi right here. Now, my biggest fear was that this would have been that Z Happy Hour Jirachi that's been flying around down here a lot. And for those of you who do not know, Z Happy Hour will increase every single one of your stats by one stage, meaning you get a 50% boost to every single stat, bar HP, for going for Z Happy Hours. So that's horrifying, especially with Jirachi's very wide mood pool. It can carry a lot of different options to catch a lot of different mons, depending on what you're trying to lure. It gets things such as Thunder, Energy Ball, Iron Head, which is pretty typical for a Jirachi, Fire Punch, you know, just standard fare. But the thing is, you never really know what it is until it's too late. I mean, you can kind of tell by looking at their team and say, okay, Jirachi probably is meant to take out these things, so X-Mon can sweep or whatever. But in this case, my biggest fear is definitely that this is a Z Happy Hour Jirachi. It turns out not to be, thankfully for me. And then we see Raikou in the second slot. Raikou is a bit of a problem to this team, depending on how things go. It's one of those mons that, in theory, could run through this team. We really only have the Thunderous that prevents it from going for a Stab Electric move, thanks to my Volt Absorb. But that said, we also have Celebi in the back here, which can also sponge hits from it quite nicely if the need arises. Lead Azelf is Lead Azelf, you know, it just Stealth Rocks, explodes, that kind of thing. And these are just my initial thoughts, just looking at his team, of course. And then we have Swellow here. Swellow is actually very interesting right now. It actually got a huge boost to its special attack stat in between generations. It used to be base 55, if I'm not mistaken, but now it is base 75. And what that does is allow it to run a very, very dangerous choice spec set. It has access to the move Boom Burst, which is a hilariously strong normal type move, I believe, of 140 base power. So essentially, it can spam a 210 base power move to almost no consequence. Although normally you would be able to avoid normal type attacks with the ghost types, Swellow does have the ability Scrappy, which will allow you to hit normal types with, or excuse me, it allows you to hit ghost types with normal and fighting type moves, which is relevant for its Boom Burst, obviously. So yeah, it's very scary right now. It doesn't have anything that can really switch into a Boom Burst bar a dedicated special wall or something like a Gigalith. And we're not rocking oh my gosh, we're not rocking a Gigalith on oh my god. We don't have a Gigalith on our rain team for obvious reasons, I would assume. So yeah, this thing is looking a little bit scary to us, is it not? Finally, we have Starmie on his team, which I assume would be his Rabbit Spinner, and spoiler alert, it is, I know, crazy. And then just Zygarde Dog, which is, it's a pretty good modern Yu, I must admit. Has very strong priority in the form of extreme speed, as well as a very spammable move and 1,000 arrows. I expect this to be a choice band set, and I assume that it in fact is. I don't get like clear confirmation on that, but it does a lot of damage, and we'll see that when we see that. So let's start out here on turn 1. He's going to lead with Azelf, and I'm going to lead with Polytoad. So this is pretty standard fare. It's just lead Azelf. First thing he's going to do is get up his rocks, I'm just going to go for a Scald right here. Now, as I've said, I kind of know what lead Azelf is all about, so I'm going to take this opportunity here to go into Klefki to scout for the explosion if he wants to go for it. I don't want to sack my Polytoad to a potential explosion because it will, if not outright kill me, it'll cripple me to the point where I'm not going to be able to switch in. So that's exactly what happens. He goes for an explosion here. It doesn't do a whole lot to Klefki, able to take that hit easily, and now we're in a fairly decent position. He's already lost one of his mons, and we've only really traded that for 30% on our Klefki. Now he's going to go right into the threat himself. Raikou, big dog. And he makes a good play here, and he goes right for Shadow Ball. I assume he predicts Celebi, which is, again, a good play. I'm not going to want to stay in and take that. And that does so much damage, so we can see right there that he's definitely choice specs. I'm going to stay in once to recover just to see what he wants to go for, knowing that I'm actually gaining a little bit of HP out of this. There's always the chance that he could get a special defense drop, but I'm willing to risk that right here just to try and gauge what kind of mindset he's in. So I can see he wants this dead. I'm not going to let that happen. So we heal up to a nice 61%. If need be, I can take another Shadow Ball later on, and I'm just going to go ahead and switch out right now into Tentacruel. And he makes a double into Jirachi. Now, I'm not sure exactly what he's predicting. Perhaps another Recover? Yeah, that would make sense. I think he was predicting me to go for Recover. As we see right here, he does back the U-turn, and that would have done a decent chunk to me. And if I chose to stay in or switch out, he would still get the initiative off that turn, so I understand why he made this play. But the way it turns out, I'm just going to get a free Rapid Spin here, and all of his Azelf's work was for nothing. He basically just sacked them on turn 2, and it accomplished absolutely nothing. But now, Big Swellow himself is inside, and this thing does so much damage. Tentacruel is a mon with amazing special defense, for those of you who are not necessarily the most familiar. And that's a 2-hit KO, basically, right? That's 56% off in a single attack. That's no small feat. No small feat at all. I'm going to go for a T-Spike there because I want to annoy that Starmie, that Zygarde, and that Raikou should they choose to switch in. And I'm just going to go for a Protect right here just to get a little bit of HP back. That's kind of what I was talking about earlier with that Black Sludge plus Rain Dish combination. Unfortunately, the rain ends, so I'm forced to just switch out here. There's no way I can stay in and take this. I'm going to choose to sack Klefki right here. Now, he makes it's an interesting play, and I can only assume that he predicts me right here, right? So, most players that are more familiar with the game, they know what Klefki does, right? They know that it has spikes, they know that it 9 times out of 10 is going to carry T-Wave, and then the last 2 slots are a toss-up between something of like Play Rough and or Magnet Rise. So I assume that he knows what he's doing at this point, right? So knowing that I could T-Wave him, he chooses to stay in here, and I guess I can only assume that he predicts me because nothing else makes sense. If I had went for T-Wave there, this thing is basically useless. Cutting its speed in half it's just too detrimental for Swellow. That's one of the main selling points, as a matter of fact, is the fact that it has a very strong spammable move in addition to its very good speed stat. Thunder Wave on this thing would be devastating, but I assume he predicts me not to go for that, knowing that he has both a Raikou and a Zygarde in the back that can potentially come in and take that. And it works out for him. He's able to KO my Klefki, and his Swellow is still very healthy. So I'm going to go into Thundurus. It's also something I should note. During this game, I was actually Choice Scarf on my Thundurus. And that'll give me a big boost to my speed, obviously, allowing me to outspeed something such as Swellow, which I would not normally be able to outspeed. He makes another good play here. He goes right into Zygarde on my Thunder, so this is basically a dead turn for me. He's predicting very hard at this point, so by this point I've kind of got an idea of what his mentality is and what my game plan is. I'm going to have to switch into Polytoad right here, and he just goes right for the Outrage. I should have seen this coming. He had no reason not to do this, but I didn't know if he would go for this or the 1,000 Arrows because I have this Scizor here that could easily come in on an Outrage, take 2 of them, and kill this Zygarde, and he would basically have sacked his Zygarde for no reason if I chose to do that. So I predicted 1,000 Arrows here, but no, he goes right for the Outrage. I guess that makes sense. Klefki would have been my best switch into an Outrage, and since it's down now, he has no real reason not to do for that other than the aforementioned Scizor. And I guess he expected me not to want to risk that. But I'm going to go into Polytoad, take a huge hit, and now I go into Scizor, and here we're going to see, yeah, that's not a 2-hit KO. It's not even close to a 2-hit KO. I take that comfortably. And unfortunately for him, he gets a 3-turn Outrage as opposed to the 2-turn Outrage, which means he's forced to stay in here and attack me again. I'm able to pick him off with a bullet punch, but this doesn't really matter all too much because even if he had gotten a 2-turn outrage, I would have just went for pursuit here and he would be in the same situation. His Zygarde died to do 50% to a Politoed, basically. So now he's in a really bad spot. He's got to go into Starmie here and get these hazards out of there because Raikou is his only shot at winning at this point. Unfortunately, he is a Choice Specs variant, which we've already determined that based on the Celebi damage, but I'm getting a little ahead of myself. He's just going to go for a Rabbit Spin there, clear out the hazards. He does have Natural Cure on his Starmie, meaning that the poison's not going to be long-lasting. It'll be cured upon switch out. I just go for a Baton Pass. Swallow comes back in, and now it's time we just start dropping the Thunder with Thundurus here. We're just going to go for a direct attack here. And Raikou does not take this too kindly, despite the fact that he resists it, quote-unquote. Here, I make a bit of a misplay, honestly. I don't know why I did this, looking back on it. I could have just stayed in here and just 2-hit KO'd the Raikou from this point. But I think my mentality was as follows. I don't want to reveal yet that I am a Choice Scarf Raikou because it could still come in handy versus Swellow. While the way that I have played it implies that I am most likely Choice Scarf on my Thundurus. Oh, excuse me, he's never actually stayed in yet to confirm that for himself. He has no idea whether or not I really am or if I'm just bluffing, right? So I switch out here, not running to risk the roll on this Raikou, because we also see here that it says 33.6, and that's a little sketchy to me. I could very easily get a low roll here and not manage to take him out with 2 more Thunders, and that's not something I'm willing to risk at this point. It's kind of the beauty with this team. You don't have to play super balls to the wall, and that's kind of why I like it. But let's get back to the battle here. I'm going to go into Celebi here, just kind of as fodder. He goes for a Shadow Ball. Good play, I suppose, predicting that. Yeah, there's no real reason for me to try to save this. Just looking at the rest of his team, I lose to the Starmie, I lose to the Jirachi, I lose to the Swellow. So that mod is basically useless to me. I can go here into Politoed knowing that he's locked into Shadow Ball. Now, I should be free to just go for a Toxic on the predicted Starmie. Or no, excuse me. I go for the Scald, just wanting to get damage on the Starmie. And now I have no more need for my Politoed. So I can just stay in and go for a Toxic. If he had decided to stay in with Raikou, that was fine as well. I don't think he could have taken me out with a Shadow Ball. Maybe he could have, but basically at this point I just wanted damage on anything I could. Politoed's still not doing too much for me at this point. He gets a burn on me with the Scald, which is a little bit unfortunate, meaning that he's not going to have to take as much toxic damage as he otherwise would have. But it is what it is. It doesn't end up playing too big of a role here ultimately. So now I'm going to go back into Thundurus, and at this point he has nothing to switch into this. Raikou, 2-hit KO'd. Jirachi, 2-hit KO'd. Swellow just dies. It's a Swellow, let's be honest. Starmie just dies, so I'm just going to go for a Thunder. He has nothing to switch in, and at this point I don't mind revealing that I am Scarf, because there's not too much he can do to play around it, if that makes sense. So now I make a totally unnecessary play and go into Tentacruel just to show him I know what's up. Predicting the HPIs. He can't do anything. We already know he's Specs. That does no damage whatsoever, and that's the freest Scald of my entire life. So he's going to switch into Swellow, which is really all he could do. He needs the Jirachi and the Raikou to have a shot at this game, essentially, and I get the burn here. It doesn't actually end up mattering too much. So we see him switch hard into Swellow. Obviously, he's going to go for the Boom Burst. I'm just going to Protect to get a little bit more HP back to help me better take on that Jirachi, because Tentacruel is one of the better answers I have to it. We've already seen... Have we? I can't remember. But at any rate, I know that he doesn't have the Psychic move. I don't know why I know that. This isn't the first game I played with him. I actually had a few different games that I was considering, but this is the one that was probably the closest. Yeah, I had about 3 games versus this guy that I was considering playing, 2 of which I won, 1 of which he won, and this is just the one that I felt that showcased the team the best, so maybe that's why I knew that he didn't have the Psychic on Jirachi, but at any rate, I knew the Tentacruel was going to be important for me to have around at the end, so we switch into Scizor in order to preserve that Tentacruel. He goes down to the burn. I'm just going to Bullet Punch this Jirachi just for a little bit of chip damage. It doesn't really matter. At this point, the game is over. He can't lock himself into any one move with his Raikou that can take on both Tentacruel and Thundurus at the same time. If he chooses to lock himself into an electric move, I can always switch into Thundurus due to my Volt Absorb, and if he chooses to go for any other move, Tentacruel is actually especially bulky enough that he can take it on 1v1, so the game at this point is essentially over. All I have to do is stay in here and click Scald a few times. He's going to go for Iron Head, can't do anything to me because I am a Tentacruel and he is a Jirachi, fortunately for me. So, as I say, we're just going to spam Scald for a little bit. Switches into Raikou. It's really his only chance, so I do understand that, but I'm just going to go for a Protect here, Scout out, see what he wants to lock himself into, as we have already confirmed that he is indeed Choice Specs. So we hit him up with a Protect, get a little bit of health back. Let's go to Fast Mode. I don't need Normal Mode at this point. And at this point, it's all but a foregone conclusion. He's going to go into Jirachi here. And I'm just going to double into Thunderous. I don't lose anything by that. I can go for a U-turn. We do outspeed it because at this point I am running a Choice Scarf Thunderous. He just goes for a Healing Wish to try and bring that Raikou back to full, but it's not going to matter at all. Basically, at this stage, I can just alternate between Protect and Scald, and there's nothing he can do. He has 100% lost his battle, bar some really insane hacks like crit Shadow Ball, Spadef drops on every single turn. So yeah, 36 turns, and that's going to be a good game to dividing by 0. And yeah, there you see, this guy is insanely high on the ladder, 1480. In fact, let's take a look. Where is this guy right now? I'm sure he's got to be high up on the ladder. You upload dividing by 0. Let me just get my keyboard. Whoa, this is a different keyboard than I'm used to. Divide. Oh, right there, number 9. Yeah, wow, this guy was the number 9 guy. So yeah, that's awesome, dude. Alright, so that's going to be the first game. And we're going to take a look at this one. This is just more of a showcase of Thunderous. That Thunderous shot that I was showing you guys with the electric Z move or whatever. The Gigable Havoc, there we go. It's going to take me a little bit to get into those Z moves. Anyway, we're going to lead again with Politoed. He leads with Glasgow. That's fantastic for us. I'm just going to go right for a Scald. I don't know what kind of mentality this guy is in, but he makes the good play, switches right into Volcanion. I got to get the hell out of there. Look at this right there. Look at the 53%. Volcanion is so busted, dude. I assume this is choice specs. But yeah, leading with the... what's it called? The Politoed actually helps him out a ton in this situation because now his Volcanion is inside, boys. It can just fire off these steam eruptions doing a hilarious amount of damage. It says 53%, not very effective. My ass. That's a 2-hit KO. So I have to go for Protect here in order to stay healthy. I'm going to need this thing later on in the battle. It's very useful for things such as Scizor, for the potential Cobalion, etc. I'm just going to go for a T-Spike here. The next time this Volcanion switches in, it's going to be forced to take that T-Spike and a nice Toxic. He makes a really interesting play here. Goes to Gliscor. Now, I understand that there's no way I'm going for Scald. He probably wanted to get his Toxic Orb activated. In my opinion, though, he should have just stayed in and kept using Steam Eruption because I don't have anything to switch into that. Look at my team. What am I going to switch into that? My physically defensive Politoed? My Thunderous Therian that dies instantly? My Klefki, my Celebi that's probably 2-hit KO'd? Like, you know, it's just... that thing is a monster. I have no idea how it's UU, but here we are, am I right? Needless to say, going into Gliscor is going to give me a free opportunity to switch right back out into my Politoed, but first I'm going to Protect up to go for, well, to basically get more recovery. As I said, I want to keep this thing as healthy as possible, and I actually end up making a more aggressive play here going into Thunderous. Now, the reason I do this is because the Electric Z cannot be knocked off, meaning that even if he is a knockoff variant, which he is, as he's just shown us, he can basically do nothing to touch this Thunderous. And I do carry the HP Ice, so I'm able to do a lot of damage to him back. I just go for the HP Ice right here if I'm not mistaken, and he makes the good play and switches into his Cobalion. Now, fortunately for me, because he let my Tentacle heal up so much, I can now just go right back into this, and no matter what he wants to do, he can't really touch me. He Volt Switches out, and even then we see, yeah, super effective, 23%. Cobalion is trash. We're just going to spin these rocks right out of there, and we're back to stage 1 here, pretty much. I'm going to go back into Politoed on his Gliscor. I don't agree with this Swords Dance play of his. I suppose he wanted to just start hitting things hard, but it was pretty obvious, I feel, that I was going to go back into Toad. I just go right for Scald, not wanting to mess around with the threat, and he makes the good play again and going right back into to Volcanion. This time I switch into Celebi, and he predicts that very nicely, going for a Sludge Bomb. That does a ton of damage to me, keeping in mind that I am specially defensive. I have no other real choice but to go for a Recover right here in order to heal back up. I do want to keep this thing healthy for whatever it's worth, maybe to get rocks up later on in the battle. It doesn't end up happening like that, but I was basically forced to go for the Recover right here. So now he goes back into Gliscor on my Klefki. And I'm just going to go right into Thunderous this time. Now, the last time his Cobalion came in, I chose to switch out. And the reason I do this is to kind of give him the sense that I'm choice locked into this hidden power ice, right? There was nothing stopping me for going for a Thunderbolt on his rocks and doing a ton of damage to this Cobalion. But since I had other responses to it, I didn't feel that it was necessarily a good idea to reveal my hand too soon, if that makes sense. A lot of Thunderous tend to be Choice Scarf, so if I can kind of get him in this mindset that I'm a certain... that doesn't sound too good. If I can get him in a certain mindset, though, thinking that I am Choice Scarf, thinking that I have to commit to one move if I want to use this Thunderous, obviously, then that's good for me because it'll allow me to create an opportunity for myself to set up and just sweep through the rest of his team with ease. Just looking at his team here, at +2 speed, Thunderous just manhandles them. And if I can get a +2 special attack in there as well, the game is just over. The game just ends as soon as I can set up. And that's kind of the mentality I've had throughout this entire match, right? So we create this situation right here where I go for Hidden Power Ice on his Cobalion, keeping in mind that the last time he saw this thing, I switched out on this Cobalion despite the fact that I could have taken a nice meaty chunk off him with a Thunderbolt as he goes for Stealth Rocks. So we go for HP Ice right there. And here's where things go downhill for this man. He goes for a Volt Switch on my Thunderous. Now, I touched on this, but Thunderous does have access to the Volt Absorb ability, granting you an immunity to the electric type moves, such as Volt Switch. He goes for this here thing that I am Choice Scarf and forced to switch out because HP Ice is doing basically no damage. I'm not. I can just bop him here with a Thunderbolt, and he goes down. Now, this is essentially the beginning of the end for this man, because he goes into Gliscor here, takes an HP Ice, goes for the knockoff. That's not doing anything. I can understand the knockoff play as a whole. If I were something such as Expert Belt, this knockoff would be essentially doing twice the damage. So instead of 21, you'd be looking at about 44-ish, give or take. Which would, oh, excuse me, getting a little bit of hiccups here. That would essentially put me in the range for his Scizor to come in and revenge kill me. His Cresselia, which we eventually see as Ice Beam, the Cresselia would be able to whittle me down with ease. He has the Aerodactyl, which still outspeeds me. If anything, he should have went Aerodactyl right here, or Cresselia. Those were his only two plays. Anything else would have, well, you'll see what happens. So he goes for the knockoff, realizes it doesn't do any damage. He goes for Protect here, and that's the beginning of the end for this man. I'm able to go for Agility right here. Now I outspeed the rest of his team. He goes hard into Cresselia, and since he's just staying in to Protect, I'm going to go for Nasty Plot. Now he does make a good prediction here, realizing that I am an Electric Z move. Goes into Gliscor, wastes my Z move, makes me feel really bad, man. But Gliscor can't touch me, so that's just another Nasty Plot for me. His Cresselia at this point, I believe I calculated this and it was a roll. He ends up tanking, that's fine. He goes for the Ice Beam. I was a little scared, but it's a Cresselia, thankfully for me, so it can't do a lot of damage. I'm able to just fire off 2 T-Bolts, and down this thing goes. Next up is Scizor, but thankfully for me, Thunderous does resist the Bullet Punch, and he's not able to do anything, and he's just going to forfeit right here, because that's a clean sweep. There was nothing he could do to prevent that at that point. As I say, he should have most definitely went hard into Aerodactyl or Cresselia, instead of opting to go Gliscor. That sealed the deal, in my opinion. There was nothing he could do from that point. The game was essentially over. Thunderous is a complete monster, and I don't know why it's UU. I really don't. I don't know. I have no clue why it's UU. Ban this thing. It's disgusting. I digress. On to our third and final battle. This was actually the one that I had the most fun with. This is the one I remembered. Well, it was just a good battle. You'll see. I inferred kind of that this guy probably knows his shit just from the way he was playing and just the chat on the side. The chat on the side was killing me during this one, though, dude. It was so hard to concentrate. Just they're funny as hell. But I digress. Let's jump right into the battle right now and switch sides because it bothers me. So this time I'm going to choose to lead Scizor, and he leads with Gliscor. Now, the reason I led with Scizor there is because we're looking at a rain versus sand situation, right? So he's got the Gigalith, sets up the Sand, the Alolan Muck, the Scizor, the Gliscor, etc. We have a pretty good matchup against him. However, if I choose to lead with Politoed and he chooses to lead with Gigalith, his Sandstream will activate in place of my Drizzle, putting up the Sand in place of Rain, because he is a slower Mon naturally. So I don't want to lead with Politoed because it's essentially a waste of time for me, and it would allow him to set up Stealth Rock freely due to the fact that Gigalith has a ton of natural bulk thanks to the Sandstorm boost. So yeah, I don't want to mess around with that. Instead, I choose to lead with Scizor, predicting him to lead with Gigalith, but I assume he predicts me to predict him and leads with Gliscor. I can't do anything to Gliscor with my Scizor, so I have to get the hell out of there. I go right into Thunderous hard, knowing that he can't touch me. As we saw in the last battle, even a knockoff isn't doing a goddamn thing. So here I'm going to double back into Scizor, predicting him now to go into Gigalith, knowing that I can't really touch him with my Thunderous, and that's exactly what happens. So now I'm in the driver's seat. I go for the U-turn. I get my initiative, and here comes the Toad. He has a Sand Team, so he doesn't have too many switch-ins to this. I predict him to switch into Latias, which is probably his best answer. I know that Keldio's another response that he could potentially go out into, but I don't think he wants to go into that quite yet, so as to not risk any kind of residual damage, be it either this Toxic that I go for right here or a Scald Burn. I say that because Keldeo is very important to his team in terms of really just breaking me down. My Scizor doesn't appreciate it, Thundurus doesn't appreciate it, Klefki doesn't appreciate it, and it is revealed later that he is in fact sub-Calm Mind, so you can see where there's a lot of potential for that to put in work against my team. Although it is a rain team, my responses to it aren't too particularly strong if he gets up a boost. Like, what is Tentacruel going to do to a Keldeo at +1, you feel me? I might be able to take hits for days, but I'm not doing anything back. We do fortunately have the Psychic on Celebi, but again, if he's able to accumulate enough boosts, it can potentially either break through my team or just straight sweep me. So I don't feel that he's going to want to risk that there, and he does indeed go right into Latias, takes a Toxic on his Latias, and he makes a good play here doubling out. In fact, if I were a madman, I could have went for Scald there, but that would be just insane. He goes into Gliscor, predicting me not to want to be insane, and I'm forcing the keys right here. I go for the Magnet Rise on his Gliscor, which will obviously grant me the immunity to any potential ground attacks, so he's forced to switch out. He doesn't want to give me all this free setup. Just give me 1 second, guys. Sorry about that, my phone was going insane for a second there. Anyways, where was I? Klefki used Magnet Rise, opposing Glass. Alright, so he's going to sub, I assume, just because I'm not able to touch him under normal circumstances. If I don't have the Magnet Rise, I'm in a bad position there, but since I've revealed it, he's forced to switch out. He actually makes a really good play by hard switching. A lot of players would be tempted to not do so once behind a sub. They'd say, okay, so I'm at least going to get the knockoff damage or whatever. But he realizes that the longer this thing is allowed to stay in and set up hazards, the better position I am in. So he's going to make the much more intelligent play and go directly into Keldeo as I set up my first layer of Spike. I'm forced out there. I don't want to take a rain-boosted Hydro Pump or rain-boosted Scald. I have no idea what this thing is at this point. And here he reveals the sub, so it's likely that he has substitute Calm Mind to attacks. He goes right there for a Scald just to start chipping me down. And I'm just going to reveal Psychic to him right now. Now, I don't expect him to stay in right here, so I'm going to actually go for the Stealth Rock. And as you can see, the hazards are starting to really rack up. Come on, animations. Work with me. No, actually go for Baton Pass. Excuse me. Sorry, I haven't watched this one in a minute. So I go for the Baton Pass there, kind of expecting this Muck to come in. I could have went for Stealth Rock there and then Baton Passed on the following turn. But because my Rain was about to run out, I feel that I didn't want to risk the potential for a Fire Punch Muck. Fire Punch obviously would murk my Scizor without the Rain to weaken the power of Fire moves. So we don't want to mess around with that. We're going to Baton Pass right into Scizor, giving us initiative again, and I can just go for a U-turn. He's caught in the void. He's just... he's more or less forced to play at my own pace because of the Baton Pass U-turn thing I got going on. So now I can go back into Toad, set up my Rain again. I haven't mentioned this, but on this Latias, I'm suspecting him to be Hidden Power Fire by this point. Just because of the way he's playing it and just looking at his team, it makes a lot of sense for him to be HP Fire because he does not deal all that well with opposing Scizor. That would be the main thing that I would be looking at. You can kind of tell that, well, yes, Keldeo can beat it. The remainder of his team just loses. He has his own Scizor to take the bullet punches, and same with Keldeo. They can both take the bullet punches, the U-turns, etc. But he has nothing to really just kill it. You know what I mean? And since Scizor commonly excuse me, let me start over. Scizor commonly likes to switch into Latias because you can just U-turn, grab yourself momentum, or just kill the Latias outright via either U-turn or Pursuit. So it makes sense to me, in my mind, that he would have Hidden Power Fire. And that's kind of why I'm trying to keep the Rain up for as much as possible, because looking at his team, I know that he probably has Hidden Power Fire, and Hidden Power Fire Latias is actually a bit of a problem. Normally I would have something like Scizor and Klefki, and even Celebi to an extent, to deal with it. However, with that HP Fire, you can just bop him on the switch, or just lure me in and just take me out that way. So I definitely value my Rain a lot for this battle, which is why I make a lot of the plays that I do. Anyways, let's hop back in. He's going to go Latias as I'm in with my Politoed. Just go for a Scald, just because there's no real reason to predict anything. He's already Toxic, so I know he can't really afford to stand too much. So there, I'm actually going to make a switch into Celebi, knowing that I'm especially defensive set. Even if he has Hidden Power Fire, it's not going to matter in the slightest, thanks to the Rain boost, as I was saying, or the Rain nerf, even. So here, this time I choose to get on my rocks, and here's the only here's the only play that's kind of questionable on his part, and I attribute this to the fact that just the way the chat is talking, maybe he used to play a lot of UU, but he's like been out of the game or something. And the way he's been playing so far, like looking back on these turns, he's obviously a very capable opponent. He knows what he's doing. He's been around the block a few times. But here he goes for a Pursuit on my Baton Pass, and I've already revealed Baton Pass. And this is essentially the beginning of the end. Although, to be fair, he was in a very bad position as it was, and I can understand being pressured to make some kind of play there. But I'm fairly certain I've covered this, but Pursuit is not able to let me try again. I don't know. I can't find my words right now. Sorry guys, I'm failing. Pursuit is not able to trap a baton pass user. So while he may have thought that he had me in a checkmate position there, it actually couldn't be further from the truth. I'm going to baton pass out into Scizor, take no damage from this, and now he's in a terrible spot. I have both Stealth Rock up, as well as a layer of Spike. Anything grounded that wants to come in is going to be taking 25%, and he's basically forced into Gliscor here. It's the only thing he can reliably switch into. Keldeo also would have been acceptable if you wanted to be a little bit more aggressive with it, but I assume that he's realized by this point Gliscor is not doing too much. I'm going to U-turn out, and this time I believe I go into Thundurus. And if I'm not mistaken, he just lets this thing go, and I agree with that completely. So as to not risk me getting cheeky, maybe going for a potential Thunderbolt or anything like that, anything crazy. Now, at this point, I get a little passive, I suppose. I could have won the game right there on the Gliscor. If I had chosen to go for Agility instead of HP Ice, I think the game just ended, but I didn't want to risk like a Toxic there. We've already seen Substitute, and it was very likely that he was Sub-Toxic Protect, or well, Sub-Toxic and like Roost or something, you know? Something annoying like that that would put me on a timer, put me at a disadvantage, and I still want this Thundurus because it's able to check something such as Scizor. It can take a hit from Mug if need be. Scizor being the main thing though, because it prevents him from spamming Bullet Punch, seeing as I am at full health, and I can always set up on that later since there's nothing he can do to touch me. He goes into Keldeo, and I don't want to stay in to take this on, so I'm going to go hard into Celebi, and he just goes hard for a Calm Mind, that's a good play on his part, because that's going to allow him to go for 2 on my switch, and now he puts me in a position where I have to stand with Celebi, and I have to let this thing go. As he goes for the Secret Sword, it's doing a pretty good amount, almost 40% on a resisted hit, which is pretty impressive to me, and the people in the chat are like, HP Bug, and I'm going to be honest, at this point I'm thinking like, oh shit, what if he's HP Bug? And then I thought about it, because he already showed Substitute and Calm Mind. Nobody runs Substitute, Calm Mind, Hidden Power Bug, Secret Sword. If you do, you're better than me and you deserve to win. Fortunately, he is a normal set with just Scald and Secret Sword, so we're able to take him on 1v1. Now he's more or less forced into Scizor. He could have went Muck, I suppose, but there's nothing stopping me from BPing out. He goes Scizor. And he goes for the U-turn, as he should, and now we see that he's banded, so at this point it's pretty much the home stretch. I can just sack my Celebi right here. I have no further use for it. We've already gotten rocks up. Keldeo is dead. I'm just going to let that go and allow myself to go into my own Scizor, maintain momentum. I just go for a U-turn knowing that it'll knock him out, and I go hard into Klefki so as to, well, I wanted to kind of lure this thing in, sort of. I really thought he had HP Fire, and there he finally reveals it. I'm just going to go over Play Rough, knock him out. No. Okay, the reason I went into Klefki, now it's making more sense. I didn't want him to defog, because I assumed that Latias is his defogger. Maybe a 3 attacks defog set. That seems like it could be pretty potent. And I don't want him to get rid of my hazard, so I just go into Klefki knowing that if he does choose to defog, his Latias has to die to do so, because I do carry the Play Rough, fortunately for me. So now it's basically game. He has to go into Scizor. He can't lock himself into Bullet Punch, because if he does that, I can just set up with Thundurus and immediately win. He basically, no matter what he locks himself into, I have a response for it. So I just stay in, see what he wants to do. He goes for Bug Bite. That does a ton. But that, again, that just confirms that he's banded and that the game is essentially over at this point. I go into Tentacle, just fire off a Scald. Scizor goes down. And there I think he says, he's like, oh my god, I actually outsped. And that surprised me too. So this man is actually running max speed Jolly Scizor, because I run 245 speed on the Tentacruel for things such as, for things like Honchkrow, basically, that I want to be able to outspeed and attack before they can attack me. And this man actually outspeeds me with a Scizor, so he's either running Scarf Scizor or max speed Jolly, but based on the damage, he's got to be max speed Jolly Van. But as I say, this game is essentially over. All he has is Gigalith left, and I have 5 members of my team remaining. So I'm just going to stay in and fire off Scalds. There's no reason to do anything else. No reason to drag this battle out. And despite the fact that I win this one 4-0, spoiler alert, I still think this might be one of the stronger games, both in terms of how my opponent played and my own playing as well. Obviously, that Pursuit was a bit of a misplay, but all in all, I would say he seemed like a very experienced opponent, knew what he was doing, very familiar with the tier, the threats, and what things could do. And personally, I find that I have better games against people like that than I do against people who maybe are lesser experienced, because I find there's less room for me to overpredict. Essentially, is if I know that they know how to value their mons, I can play a certain way, and then you get games like this. Whereas if I'm versing up against somebody who maybe doesn't know how to value their mons or doesn't know what they should keep alive, then I end up putting myself in bad positions a lot of the time. But that's a story for another time. Maybe a Showdown Live or something like that. I don't know. Anyways, it's probably been going for like half an hour now, so if you did happen to enjoy these little replays things or anything like that, enjoyed hearing my thought process, whatever have you, feel free to leave a like, comment, do whatever you want to do. It doesn't bother me. No skin off my nose, man. Live your life the way you gotta live it. Anyways, guys, till next time, see y'all later. Peace.